What if I told you that the world's first officially Christian nation wasn't Rome, wasn't Constantinople, and wasn't even in the Middle East where Christianity began? What if the most pivotal moment in Christian political history happened on a fog-shrouded island at the edge of the known world, declared by a warrior king whose very name meant Great Light? Today, we're diving into one of history's most overlooked stories, how King Lucius of Britain made a decision in 156 AD that would echo through the centuries and challenge everything you thought you knew about early Christianity. Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history, and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe, and share. Help build my channel, and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Picture this: it's the year 140 AD. The last of Jesus' original disciples have passed away. Saint John, who had outlived all the others, finally died at the remarkable age of 101. Joseph of Arimathea, who had brought Christianity to Britain decades earlier, was long gone, having died around 82 AD at the sacred site of Avalon. The founding generation, those who had walked with Christ or learned directly from those who had, were now just memories. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren carried the torch forward into an uncertain future. But what a torch they carried! In just 66 years after Christ's death, this handful of believers had accomplished what seemed impossible. Armed with nothing but faith and the promise of salvation, they had conquered the mightiest empire the world had ever known. Not through swords or armies, but through conviction. Christian centers had sprouted across the known world like wildfire, from Jerusalem to Athens, from Alexandria to Spain, from the islands of Cyprus and Crete to the great cities of Asia Minor. And at the heart of this explosion of faith stood Britain. While Rome persecuted Christians and forced them into the catacombs, Britain had become something extraordinary, a safe haven, a fortress of faith. From the legendary site of Avalon, an endless stream of missionaries poured forth into Gaul, Germany, Switzerland, and Rome itself. British Christians didn't just participate in the spread of the gospel, they led it. They were the backbone of the early church's expansion into Europe. But let's get back to our story, because by 137 AD, something significant was brewing in Britain. A young prince named Uric was about to step onto history's stage. His uncle, Saint Timotheus, the son of the famous Claudia and Pudens of Rome, made a special journey from the Eternal City to Winchester. There, in a ceremony that would change everything, he baptized his nephew and consecrated him as defender of the faith, making him the rightful successor to King Arviragus, who had originally received this honor from Joseph of Arimathea himself. Who was this young prince? His Roman name was Lucius, derived from the Latin word for light, lux. But his Celtic name told you everything you needed to know about him, Luva, meaning the Great Light. To the Romans, he was the Great Luminary. And his bloodline, simply put, it was extraordinary. Through his father Coel, he could trace his ancestry directly back to the legendary British heroes Caractacus and Arviragus. This wasn't just any king, this was a man who carried the blood of Britain's greatest warriors and its most devoted Christian monarchs. Lucius chose to make his royal seat at Winchester, and even this choice reveals something profound. Winchester had been founded around 500 BC by Dunwall Molmutius, one of the three wise British kings, a brilliant lawmaker who had created the city on an ancient Druidic sacred site. Known as the White City, for its distinctive chalk walls, Winchester represented continuity with Britain's pre-Christian past while embracing its Christian future. It was so significant that centuries later, William the Conqueror refused to consider his first coronation legitimate until he was crowned a second time at Winchester, believing that only there could one truly claim the British throne. Now, here's where our story reaches its climax. The year was 156 AD. King Lucius convened a national council at Winchester. What happened next would reverberate through history. In an act of unprecedented boldness, Lucius officially proclaimed Christianity as the national faith of Britain. Not just his personal faith. Not just the faith of the court. The national faith, by act of parliament, declared before the entire realm. Let that sink in for a moment. This was the year 156 AD. The Roman Empire, the most powerful force on earth, was still viciously pagan and actively persecuting Christians. Believers in Rome were being thrown to lions in the Colosseum for entertainment. The catacombs were filled with Christians hiding in fear. And yet, here was Lucius, standing before his council in Winchester, officially declaring that Britain, as a nation, was Christian. The British Triads, those ancient records of Welsh history, preserve the exact wording of this momentous declaration. King Lucius was the first in the Isle of Britain who bestowed the privilege of country and nation and judgment and validity of oath upon those who should be of the faith of Christ. In simple terms, Lucius wasn't just saying Christians were tolerated or even welcome. He was saying that Christianity was woven into the very fabric of British law, governance, and national identity. This wasn't just important, it was revolutionary. Yes, his great-grandfathers Caractacus and Arviragus had been Christian kings, but they had ruled during a different era. Their time had been about survival, about converting their people, about organizing the church, and about defending against Roman persecution. They had fought 60 major battles against Rome between 43 and 86 AD. They had bled to protect the faith. But they couldn't yet make the declaration that Lucius now made. The timing was finally right. The great Roman commander Agricola, having experienced British military prowess firsthand, had wisely shifted strategy. Rather than continuing the futile attempt to conquer Britain, he recognized the Britons as allies of the Roman Empire, preserving all their native freedoms and royal prerogatives. Emperor Hadrian expanded this treaty in 120 AD. The Romans could maintain certain military bases, but Britain remained sovereign. This peace would last until around 300 AD, and it created the perfect conditions for Lucius's declaration. The Christian world erupted in celebration. Finally, after over a century of persecution, prayer, and martyrdom, one nation had officially taken a stand. A writer named Sabellius, recording events around 250 AD, captured it perfectly. Christianity was privately confessed elsewhere, but the first nation that proclaimed it as their religion, and called itself Christian, after the name of Christ, was Britain. Another historian, Genebrand, put it even more powerfully: the glory of Britain consists not only in this, that she was the first country which in a national capacity publicly professed herself Christian, but that she made this confession when the Roman Empire itself was pagan and a cruel persecutor of Christianity. Now, here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Fast forward several centuries, and the Roman Catholic Church began making a rather extraordinary claim. They asserted that this epochal moment, this historic declaration by Lucius, was actually brought about by Pope Eleutherius in Rome. They tried to rewrite history, to claim credit for what had happened in Britain. But there's a glaring problem with this claim: nobody in Rome mentioned it for over 400 years. Not a single allusion to papal involvement appears until after 597 AD, when the Italian Augustinian mission arrived in Britain. That's more than 440 years after Lucius's declaration. If Rome had truly orchestrated this world-changing event, why the centuries of silence? The answer is obvious to anyone looking at the evidence objectively. Britain's decision was made independently, courageously, and in defiance of Roman paganism, not because of Roman Christianity. The later attempts to claim credit reveal more about medieval church politics than they do about historical reality. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Why does the story of King Lucius matter today, nearly 2,000 years later? First, it reminds us that the early church was far more diverse and decentralized than we often imagine. Rome wasn't always the center. In fact, during Christianity's most vulnerable years, it was places like Britain, protected by warrior kings and fierce believers, that kept the faith alive and spread it across Europe. Second, it challenges us to consider what genuine faith looks like. Those early Christians, led by kings like Lucius, didn't have the luxury of casual belief. Their faith cost them something. It defined their laws, their culture, their national identity. They didn't just attend church when it was convenient, they built their entire civilization around their convictions. Finally, it's a reminder that courage at the right moment can change the world. Lucius could have waited. He could have kept his faith private. He could have avoided making waves while Rome was still hostile. But instead, he stood up at the National Council in Winchester and declared to the world, Britain is a Christian nation. And in doing so, he gave hope to persecuted believers throughout the Roman Empire and set in motion events that would ultimately transform the entire Western world. The question we started with was, what happened when Britain became the world's first Christian nation? The answer is profound. One king's courage created a beacon of hope in a dark world, proving that faith, when boldly proclaimed and genuinely lived, could indeed move mountains and change the course of history forever. That's the story of Lucius, the great light, the king who dared to stand alone so that millions would never have to stand alone again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.